A prophet tells one king to sit still and do absolutely nothing during a siege. A generation later, he tells another king to stand firm and resist. Same prophet. Opposite advice. On the left, King Ahaz, trembling as enemy armies surround Jerusalem in 734 BCE. Isaiah says, "Be quiet, do not fear." On the right, King Hezekiah, facing the full might of Assyria in 701 BCE. Isaiah says, "Do not surrender." Is this prophet confused, or is something deeper going on? The answer lies in a covenant most people overlook when they read Isaiah. Not the covenant at Sinai, but the covenant with David. To understand Isaiah's logic, we need to understand which covenant he's working from, and it's not the one you might expect. The prophets Amos and Hosea built their entire message on the Mosaic covenant, the Sinai tradition. Exodus, wilderness, law. Israel broke the covenant, God will punish. Isaiah operates from a different foundation entirely, the Davidic covenant. This is God's promise to King David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, that David's dynasty would endure forever and that God would never abandon Jerusalem, his chosen dwelling place. Scholars call this the doctrine of the inviolability of Zion. Now, the first crisis. In 734 BCE, the kingdoms of Aram and northern Israel form an alliance and march on Jerusalem. They want to force King Ahaz of Judah to join their coalition against the rising Assyrian Empire. Ahaz is terrified. Isaiah meets him and delivers extraordinary advice: "Be quiet and do not fear. These two smoldering stumps of firebrands, they will not stand." This is not political naivety. This is Zion theology in action. God dwells in the midst of Jerusalem. No foreign power can overthrow the city God has chosen. Isaiah stakes everything on one demand: trust. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. Ahaz does not believe. He sends tribute to the Assyrian emperor, Tiglath-Pileser, begging for rescue. In Isaiah's eyes, this is a catastrophic betrayal of the covenant. During this crisis, Isaiah offers Ahaz a sign. A young woman who has already conceived will bear a son, and she will name him Immanuel, meaning God is with us. Before that child knows right from wrong, the two threatening kings will be gone. Two critical details. First, the Hebrew word here is almah, which means young woman of marriageable age. It does not specifically mean virgin. That's a different Hebrew word, betula. Second, the Hebrew verb is past tense. She has conceived, not will conceive. This sign points to the present crisis, not a distant future. So who is this child? Isaiah's own son, the queen's child. The text leaves it open, but the strongest clue comes next. But the Immanuel sign goes deeper than a single crisis, and it connects to some of the most famous words in the entire Bible. 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 7 describes King Hezekiah with a striking phrase: "The Lord was with him." In Hebrew, that phrase is nearly identical to the name Immanuel's, God is with us. And then there's Isaiah chapter 9. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace." In its original context, this is praise of a Davidic king. Many people know these words from Christmas readings. The Christian tradition, beginning with the Gospel of Matthew, applied the Immanuel prophecy to Jesus. This happened in part because the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Septuagint, rendered almah as parthenos, meaning virgin, shifting the meaning. And that's a legitimate reading tradition with enormous historical influence. But the original Hebrew text, in its original historical context, points to the Davidic line and most likely to Hezekiah. The chronology is imperfect. Scholars debate the exact dates, but the thematic coherence is strong. Hezekiah is the king whose name means God strengthens, whose reign embodies God is with us, and who sits on David's throne. Now the second crisis, around 714 BCE, Hezekiah considers forming an alliance with Egypt against Assyria. Isaiah is furious. He delivers one of the sharpest lines in all of prophetic literature. The Egyptians are man, not God, and their horses are flesh, not spirit. And then Isaiah does something extraordinary. He parades naked through the streets of Jerusalem for 3 years. This is what scholars call a prophetic sign act, a dramatic physical performance meant to embody a divine message. Isaiah's naked body represents the humiliation and slavery that will come to those who trust Egypt. Egypt's armies will be stripped and led away as captives, and anyone who relies on them will share that fate. Prophets in the ancient Near East used these shocking performances to break through political complacency. Ezekiel would later push this tradition even further. Notice the pattern. In 734, Isaiah opposed alliance with Assyria. Around 714, he opposed alliance with Egypt. The target changes, the principle holds. Do not trust foreign powers. Trust the God who made promises to David. The third crisis, 701 BCE, the Assyrian emperor Sennacherib invades Judah, destroys 46 fortified cities, and lays siege to Jerusalem itself. This is the moment that seems to contradict everything Isaiah has said. Isaiah had called Assyria the rod of God's anger, a tool of divine punishment. So shouldn't Hezekiah submit? Isaiah says the opposite. Do not capitulate. God will defend this city. And here the Davidic theology becomes explicit. Isaiah chapter 37, verses 33 to 35, God declares he will protect Jerusalem for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David, not for the people's righteousness, not because they kept the law, for David's sake. The covenant with David is the theological ground on which Jerusalem stands, and Jerusalem survives. The Assyrian army withdraws. The doctrine of Zion's inviolability is powerfully confirmed, at least for now. So if Isaiah wasn't contradicting himself, what was his actual framework? Let's put it all together. Start with the foundation. God's covenant with David means Zion is inviolable. From there, Isaiah asks one question: what is the king tempted to do? If the king is tempted to form a foreign alliance, whether with Assyria in 734 or Egypt in 714, Isaiah says, reject it, trust God alone. If the threat is a direct assault on Zion itself, as in 701, Isaiah says, resist, God will defend his city for David's sake. Different advice, same demand. The specific political action changes with circumstances. The theological posture never moves. Absolute trust in Yahweh's promise to David. One common misreading: Isaiah was a pacifist. He was not. He counseled military resistance in 701. Another: Isaiah contradicted himself. He did not. The variable was the political situation. The constant was the theological demand. And the third, the Immanuel prophecy is only about a distant future. The Hebrew text, the word almah, the past tense verb, the immediate political context, all point first to Isaiah's own time and the Davidic line. Understanding Isaiah's Davidic framework changes how we read some of the most famous passages in the Bible. It reveals how a single theological conviction, God's faithfulness to David's line, could generate radically different political advice depending on the circumstances. It helps us distinguish between original historical meaning and later theological reinterpretation. For Isaiah, the question was never, what should we do? It was always, whom do you trust?